Okay. All right. Now let's go to the panel discussion here, and I'm going to open up. I think I have three questions. I'm going to begin with the first one here. I think it was brought up in the discussion of, are there any real practices out there? Does anybody know companies that are actually doing this? And this gets into the issue of feasibility. Abbas, do you want to please ask your question or your comment? I think you made an observation. Abbas, are you with us still? You
Yes,
turn on
hello.
your. Go ahead.
Yeah, first, I'm Abbas Batu. I'm from Lund University in Sweden. And I'm doing I'm a PhD student. I'm doing some research about trust and blockchain technology as well. I published also a few articles about that. So for us, we were doing some research with the food industry in Australia. So mango supply chain. And then also we did some metal industry for steel and copper in Sweden, and then also distributed outside Sweden. So the main issue that either they are not using blockchain technology in a very decentralized way, so they limit the data and they make it more private, which is, I'm not sure if that's also getting the benefit of blockchain technology. The other issue is that many projects are pilots or proof of concepts and they don't continue. Now I've been following with my, now I did studies like 2-3 years ago, and I've been following with them now. They stopped using blockchain technology, so no more they are using it. And their main purpose was for making more transparent carbon footprint traceability and more sustainable, especially in the metal industry. So that's what I'm wondering, if there is any successful case that's continued using blockchain technology. So from my experience, I've been into different companies in the metal industry and in the supply chain for steel and copper, for example, and they eventually stopped using it after testing and pilot projects.
Yeah. Okay, panelists, the issue of what's going on here. Is this going to be something that's long-term, or is it bad? Is what I get out of this. Abdullah, would you like to begin with a response?
Yes, I would like to start that. Thank you very much for that question, Abbas. As Abbas mentioned about that, I've tried to explain a couple of our research. That's why maybe it was fast, but now I have a chance to explain them detailed. And during our research, we found a similar risk, and that's why we asked that question to people. Or if you don't have informed people, and then you're not going to be able to sustain that system. And according to our research, we found that if the government support that, if the main manufacturers support that systems, then they can have a chance to sustain. Otherwise, if you don't know who is responsible from that system, who's going to help to develop and sustain that blockchain technologies, they have face-to-face that kind of end projects, and then they cannot sustain the blockchain technology. Yes, this is what we learned that. And another part, I believe, Professor, you are going to mention about that, and you started that idea, the energy consumption. And we work on that also. This is another issue why the companies doesn't want to continue. And also they don't want to share the information. And I've read similar comments on the chat. This is also trustable issues. And we have to come over their issues. And then we have to work on that energy consumption. And we are working on another project right now, how to solve that energy consumption. And probably Professor is going to mention about that. But yes, that's the problem. And that's why we are working on that. If we clearly define that stakeholder roles, and then for the carbon emission, Professor, you asked that question, so I would like to answer that question. Yes, if we define the roles of that stakeholders, we'll be able to monitor the carbon emission values with the blockchain technology, because I've involved a couple projects. The governments would like to have that values, that carbon emission values from the companies, from the stakeholders. And they don't have like that kind of huge and decentralized systems. And that's why it has some breakdowns within that stakeholder interactions. That's blockchain can offer that solution. And if government invests that kind of technologies, they be able to have that feedback from the stakeholders, and they be able to reach the data, monitor the data, that transparent data, and that they can manage that systems based on that carbon emission values.
Okay. I'm not going to go to Yanji. Yanji, we have a question for you later. Matthew, do you want to respond to this issue?
What is the issue, please?
The issue is the feasibility of using blockchain anywhere, anytime, especially for carbon emissions.
Mhm.
Yes, for our part of the world, let's say in West Africa, in Ghana, it's a bigger issue because the idea of blockchain penetration is even not as enhanced as in the other part of the world. So it's really a challenge. Now, at this point, I think that we should concentrate on educating the people and for them to understand the benefits. Because like we did in the study, in the cocoa supply chain, where we are talking of emissions, these are people who, if you do not know what the technology is all about. So how do we even think of implementation when people are not even so much aware of the benefit of that technology? So I think, yes, at this point, because of some kind of, let me say, ignorance, people are really not aware of it. It will be very difficult to implement some of these things. And it's one of the challenges that the UNDP faced when they came to do the feasibility studies. So they had a pilot, and I think last week I got the information from GIZ that they have started some blockchain traceability in Ghana's cocoa supply chain. And like the question that Abbas asked, I was wondering, is it really blockchain or maybe a different traceability system? So I quickly put a call to one of the technical people and I said, wow, I'm very interested in seeing your blockchain traceability that you have implemented in cocoa supply chain to see whether or not indeed it's a blockchain or maybe something else that can perform some traceability duties. So yes, I think in Africa, there could be very serious challenges to the implementation because the education itself is not as enhanced as we used to be. And that's why in our study, we had to play a video to the local farmers for them to understand what the blockchain is all about. And we used a video from the agriculture supply chain in Nigeria that are implementing a blockchain for the cocoa supply chain. So we played the video, they watched, we interpreted in the local language before they came to kind of to terms with the idea before we were able to. So yes, there are so many implementation challenges that we have to overcome from this part of the world. Thank you.
Okay, so Matthew, what you gave was people who in the supply chain are going to be using it. And what Yanji talked about was consumers and their trust or knowledge of supply chain. So I'm going to move to another question that's kind of related. Matt, you asked a question about consumer information. Would you like to ask that question a little more clearly and bring it up, please?
Yeah, I had it came specifically from Yanji's presentation, but I'm sure the others may have comments too. But I was curious with like what information was given to the consumers to inform them as to why they would choose blockchain supported carbon neutral shipping versus the regular carbon neutral shipping. Because some of the work I do, like there's a lot of buzzwords, and so I'm wondering if consumers are drawn more to a buzzword or what type of information was given to them to inform them in that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree that so in order to avoid that, just because they are more, attracted to those buzzword, for the blockchain, when we talk about the blockchain supported carbon neutral shipping, we do provide an interactive map that basically we map out the whole supply chain. We're talking about apparel products in our experiment. So we're talking about apparel product from where the raw materials is sourced, as well as to the manufacturer, as well as um, um, to the distributor, and then to the retailer, and then at the end to the consumer. We did create an interactive map by using a geo mapping system, and then so consumers that belongs to that scenario, they are able to see all the information at each steps along the supply chain of the products, like where the raw materials from, what's the address, and who is handling, who is making the manufacturing processes. So we provide all types of information because supposedly that's what companies can use blockchain to do when they're trying to be more transparent about their supply chain. So we do create an interactive map, and we do find that consumers, when they have access to this map, their perception just significantly increased. And so yeah, that's kind of, we're trying to provide additional validation on top of we're just saying that we're doing it without any proof. So
Okay, thank you, Yanji. There was a couple questions related to the globalization idea that, first of all, there was one comment here saying, hey, you can't see just about all of Africa. It was Ghana. I saw that comment as well. There's another questioner saying, well, in Kenya, we've had some difficulties, but let's talk more broadly and globally. I think, Catherine, you kind of asked a question related to what's going on in the European, but how do you place that within the broader global perspective as well? Would you like to ask your question, Catherine?
Yeah, it's kind of related to the cocoa supply chain. So I'm currently doing a lot around UDR. Actually doing my PhD at RWTH in Aachen, but I'm also working at EY, advising clients on how they're getting ready for example, European deforestation regulation requirements. And that's exactly the thing, how they started to do like real traceability from raw material to finished product, with blockchain being maybe a suitable question or a suitable technology. But my question is, yeah, how do you get the data? I mean, it was related to what Matthew already explained. What if you don't have the data? What if the data is not available at like every raw material region, for example? How do we close the data gaps? How do we get it from, let's say, everywhere around the world to in the EU, and not only like having random data, but like having blockchain data, which are yeah, trusted, etc.
So anybody want to take that question on? Catherine, very quickly, what is the thing that you want to ask the panelists in that case? Is it global data? How do you get global data? Is that it?
How do you get global data, not only to get it, but like how do you verify it?
Okay, and that means globally. What we're talking about supply chains is a global situation, and again, getting back to some of the feasibility. Go ahead, Abdullah.
I can answer that one. We have discussed about that topics before, to be honest. Like as we said, that the human involvement is a big challenge for the blockchain integration. We know that the blockchain has a lot of challenge, like technological challenge and technical skills required, and also investment and cost required. For the global perspective, I believe that we have to integrate that without human interaction systems to the supply chains. And then with that help, maybe we can minimize that trust issues and we can increase that security. It means that the sensors, as Matthew worked on cocoa supply chain, I worked on the tea supply chain. And we know that who works in that kind of supply chains, most of them are child. And another reason we would like to increase the blockchain integration into that supply chain management systems to minimize that child labor around rate, and to increase the awareness. With that help, if we integrate the sensors, if we integrate the observation systems with the technology integration, that help us to minimize and that help us to increase the security. But in that part, the question can arise, and then you can ask that, how are you going to integrate the technology middle of nowhere? Like they collect the harvesting, they do harvesting. How are you going to observe them? How are you going to put the sensors over there? How are you going to get the data? These are the issues. We still think about that, but also these are worth to research it. And then how can we use it? And we know that right now, most of the satellite systems, or for Elon Musk, developed some satellites and some internet connections, which provide the data and you can reach the internet. It should improve in the future, close future, maybe just a bit far. But if we integrate that technologies and minimize that human interaction, I believe we can increase the safety and security of that supply chains and minimize that human effect on the supply chain trustability. That's what I'm thinking about that, about blockchain effectiveness.
Could I ask a second little question to this?
Yes.
Thanks for the clarification. I 100% agree that is like the way forward, but like who should pay, or who's going to pay for it? Because I see a huge invest case, like, or investment needed firstly for not only the blockchain technology, but of course like the sensors don't make it any, I don't know, less
That-
costly.
Yeah, that's a great question. Then Matthew, I'll just answer that and you can continue with your experience. I got the similar question. We have a startup project which is about that blockchain integration into lithium-ion batteries. And then I mentioned about the same outputs and I got the same questions. And who's experienced in that industry more than 30 years? And he gave me some couple examples. For example, for Africa continent, they do like water pumping and to provide water to some peoples. And he asked the same. And then he asked me that question. And he said that, do you think who support that pumps and who do that activities? They require cost. And then he mentioned some NGOs and some other big companies. They would like to promote themselves. And within that perspective, we are talking about that environmental friendly companies, sustainable companies. And if companies would like to be sustainable, they can take the role and they can support it. And they can be the leader in that field, and then they can show that. And of course, if government, we define the stakeholder roles, and we said that governments should be involved in this field. And if governments involved, and what we are trying to do that, we try to define the roles of that stakeholder. If we fund that role, according to our research, government should take responsibilities. If government took that responsibilities, they can give them some exemption about that tax returns, or they can support it, and companies use that, and we can find some finance according to that one. And as we know that some, especially related to customers, they don't have to pay that. And Yanji has more experience, and she has research on that. And customer willingness is changed, depends on that. At price is not that much important, but still important. We have to think about that. But as I believe that government and big companies can take a role and they can support it. Thank you. Matthew, yeah.
Matthew or Yanji, wanted to add on to that?
Quickly want to touch on Catherine's question on how can we get the global data? And for me, something just came to mind that if there are organizations are saying that they are using blockchain to enhance sustainability, if indeed that is what they are doing, then it shouldn't be difficult for them to share the data for people to say, wow, okay, we support what you do. For example, I know that in the cocoa supply chain, Nestle and some other companies were charged for child labor. Okay, now if indeed you have a blockchain system in place, that's kind of trace the cocoa from, let's say, the farmer to the point of consumption, and indeed you know that you are not using the child labor, it even kind of exonerates you. So I think that if indeed the companies are using the blockchain to address some of these challenges, then they should be willing to share, especially for academics, so that we can kind of maybe broadcast it for them that, oh, this particular company is using blockchain to kind of address child labor, and this is the data that we have. But if we come to them, and like Abdallah said, and I think, what's the name? Batwa, if I get your name right, that the data is not forthcoming, then we are tempted to believe that either you are really not using the blockchain, or you are not using it for what you think you are using it for. So for me, I think it's an issue of integrity. If indeed they are responsible and they are using it for what they think they are using it for, they shouldn't have challenge sharing it. And like I mentioned, the Ghana one that I had last week, I called the company and said, look, I want to come and access your blockchain data. So kindly give me the opportunity. They said, okay, we will get back to you. And that's my first suspicion. Why do you want to get back to me if you're using it? Because you see, Ghana was cited for the child labor issues. And I think Belgium decided not to buy cocoa from Ghana. So when you have a system that is practically solving this problem, then people want to know it. You should even be happy to kind of fast track the process. But the moment you start postponing, oh, come tomorrow, we have a meeting, then there is a suspicion that either there is some skeleton in the cupboard. All right. So I think that's an issue of integrity, and the organization should be willing to share it with us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you don't trust them, huh, Matthew? You're studying trust, so you know all about trust. One final question, and we're moving away from the financial and maybe back to the trust issue. I think, Minnie, you had a question, a very general question about security, and Yanji kind of answered it. Would you like to ask your question, Minnie? Are you still with us? Okay, Minnie? I don't see.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and ask the security question. It's very straightforward. Go ahead.
Yes, I just try to wondering that whether the security issue is concerned by the consumers or the company.
And Yanji, is security a concern?
Yes, we have an ongoing project and with Karen, who is also here, and we're studying how the security of the supply chain can affect on different stakeholders, including the manager as well as the consumer with the blockchain integration. So yeah, we didn't study in the previous two study that I presented today, but we have that in some of the ongoing projects.
Okay, thank you.
So the issue of security essentially means what data can be changed, can it be addressed? Abdullah, you want to talk a little bit about security at all or not? Because I see you nodding.
I would like to mention about that. I mentioned before, like as we said, that we define the data, and as I showed in the picture, what kind of data we have to share. And we know that the blockchain has a different blockchain, like public blockchain and private blockchain. And we use that kind of blockchain, and we have to divide the blockchain within that like systems. Like we can define some data which can be accessible as a publicly, and then it can be shared with the people like other stakeholders. And some data are required privacy. And we know that in the reality, most of the companies, as we discussed till now, they don't want to share all of their data and they don't want to make it public. And that's why the private blockchain is going to help them. And then that private blockchain is going to increase the security for these companies. And then that blockchain also, the main goal is to security and help the companies to keep their data insecure with decentralized storage systems. And then with the decentralized storage system, they put their data over there and then keep them secure in private blockchains. And of course, we would like to use blockchain to increase the traceability and transparency. That's why also public blockchain should be involved in that processes. And then we have to share some data which is required for the customers. They would like to observe what we are saying, that carbon emission. We have to minimize the carbon emission. How we are going to do that? If we increase the recyclability, reusability, and repair, and then we'll be able to minimize the carbon emission. To increase that recyclability and reusability, customers should know the information, should have the data. And then if they see the data, usage life, amount of rest life, and then how they're going to process it, what is the design of that batteries, and then they be able to close themselves, and then they would like to use that. Without this data, they cannot go, and then they cannot participate or willingness to use it. So we say that blockchain is going to be public for that kind of data and for the customers, and it should be private for the internal activities or for some high-level operations. And then with that help, we can increase the security. But as I said that, when we do that split, it brings additional transaction cost. And then we have a project which we are trying to minimize that transaction cost. And then just follow us and see the results. It's going to be published, I hope, in a couple months.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
We'll stop the questions. There's many questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to all your questions. There were some really good ones that I really wanted to get to. Cecilia, I think you had a few good points, so I apologize for not getting to some of your stuff. But we're at the end here. We promised people we'd be out by 10:20. It's already 10:22. So thank you to our presenters. Thank you for our participants for the questions. There's a lot of stuff to be discussed here, and we could go on all day. Hopefully this starts the thinking process a little better. Hopefully you guys have made some connections as well. This is critical because this is a community, it seems, that's very active, or at least looking into the blockchain. And one more marketing thing from me is I am now editing a book in blockchain for business. So if you're willing to contribute a chapter, please reach out to me. My information is publicly available. Again, thank you, everybody. This was wonderful. It's great to see our community here. Have a wonderful day, morning, evening, wherever you are.